So, what are test environments? To understand this, let me explain some basics of development and how software works. Let's say developer have written code for creating this proto-commerce application. Okay. So, after he writes code, he needs to deploy that code into server. Then only you can view the application in browser by hitting that server URL. Okay, this is basic. So he can have his code in his local editor. Maybe he can write it in JavaScript, Java or Python. So he need to deploy that code into any server. So that's the basic thing. So that this code runs on that server, and which is nothing but this application. Here rahulshettyacademy.com, that is one server, and proto-commerce is my code. So my development team have deployed this proto-commerce app into this rahulshettyacademy.com server, so that I am hitting that server URL and I am able to see the application. Okay. Now when we deploy that in the server, let's say my code is configured in such a way that all these products will be taken from the database. Okay, so these products are actually stored in one DB. Let me write the notes. I'm trying to make you to understand the basics of how software development works, and from there I will try to derive the environments. Products are stored in databases, and application code will access the products and display. Okay, all these images, what to display, BlackBerry, amount, the amount, all these details are coming from database. Now when you deploy code into the server, that particular server should have a database, so that your code can talk to the database which is present in that server and display the products accordingly. Now, so whatever database your code is accessing, you have to make sure that that database is also present in that server, so that you can code, your code can map to the database which is already present in the server and retrieve the data from database and display it in the front end. Now, so in the rahulshettyacademy.com server, there is a database. This code is actually talking to the database and displaying the products here by retrieving it from the tables. So basically server have place where you can deploy, and it also have some resources like DB. Now, so dev team have their own environment to do all these actions. So after they write code, they should actually see if it is working or not, right, before they give it into QA. They cannot simply write code in their local and leave it. They need to just deploy if there is any environment available. When I say environment, it's nothing but server. So they need to deploy in any server and see if application is loading properly or not. They need to do some basic high level testing before they give it to the QA. Now once they feel this is good, then they will ask a QA to deploy the code into QA environments. Okay, so dev team will have their own environment which have the server plus database. QA also will have their own environments. Okay, so basically what QA does here, he has to take the code, or in general development team may deploy it into QA environment, or but current days trends are changing. So every QA has to know the details of how to deploy code, and that's easy process. You will have one Jenkins tool which you have to access and just you have to do some clicks to deploy code. That's not really technical thing. Okay, you will understand, and it varies from project to project, company to company. So he will actually deploy the whole code with some buttons, and that will be deployed into the QA environments. Now when I say QA environments, it will be deployed in QA server. So now code will actually talk to the databases which are in QA server to show the data on the front end. Now in QA server, if these products are not present, if only iPhone is present, then in the front end you will see only iPhone when you hit the application on QA server. So when I say server and when I say we are hitting, that means the URL also will change, right? Dev URL may be like this, rahulshettyacademy.com, sorry, academydev.com. This could be the address of dev server. So we are hitting this dev server address to validate the stuff in dev environment. So once the code is deployed into QA server, then you can access that code something like this, some different URL, because every server have its own URL. Okay, you cannot have one common URL for every server. If that is the case, how would you know which server you are hitting? Okay, once it is deployed, you can access this code in the QA server. But now when your code is actually interacting with the database which is present in your QA server, that server may not return all the products. If it return only 2 products, then you will see only 2 in your screen. But when you have requirement to verify whether at least 4 products are displaying in page, and when you realize that these products are coming from database, then you have to talk to your development team and take the queries which we need to insert those details into our database, or you can ask them to actually add this data into our QA databases, so that when it is deployed tomorrow into QA server, I can access that code with the QA server link, and then as they added few products into QA database, you can see all those. But those products may be in dev server, dev environment. So at that time you can hit dev URL and see how those are displaying. But you should have one dedicated QA environment only for testing purpose. You should not mix and mess with your dev server. That's dedicated to development. But when you come to QA server, you might have some more improved performance of RAM to load pages quickly. Okay, so because you are testing here and you are reporting bug, so that you should have some dedicated environments to actually deploy our code into our QA servers and you can test it. So when I say test environment setup, make sure your environment is ready and available before application gets ready to deploy, and you need to verify if database connections are there, or you can check at least if the data is present in the databases so that our code can access. Then you might be wondered, how would I know whether the code needs to access database or not? So your development team will give you that information, and this need to be discussed in sprint planning. Sorry, not sprint planning, sprint grooming. In sprint grooming, you will pick each and every story and try to analyze that story, like what all we need to do as part of development, and at the same time there should be discussion like how could I access, will I able to see data if I deploy this in our QA environments and start it from there. You need to check all these questions, and your development team may also help you to understand what all you need to do to make your environment ready. Okay, so that's how you need to get prepared before your test cases are ready for testing. But this is mostly a one-time effort. Once you set up, and for whole sprint, for all the test cases, you may need to skip this part. Okay, so test case development may change for every story, but this environment is something, a generic thing. If you set up with some data and tomorrow there could be another test case that verify this is clickable. As you already have the data in your database which you did for one time for test environment setup, for next user story, if there is something to validate here, you can directly do it because data is already there. Okay, so you may not repeat this for every story, unlike test case development. Okay, so now interview question. What are the challenges you have faced in your project? If that is your question, and your answer can be with this test environments. Okay, so this test environments are really challenging. Why? Let me explain you. There are two developers working on two different features. Okay, one feature, developer A is working on adding left navigation links here, category 1, category 2, category 3. Just follow me, you will understand the pain point with environments. And dev B is working on checkout page functionality. Alright, so now both are working on different branches of code. So there is one common code. Basically from this code dev A have taken clone, and on that code he is working on some changes, and dev B also taken this, cloned this code, and on that code he is working on one functionality. Later once both stories are approved, then these both will be merged into the common master code. Okay, but before merging it will come to testing, right? So dev A asks QA A to deploy this code into server and start testing, or development team will deploy this for you. Okay, but they will deploy this in QA server and they will tell that it's ready in QA to test, and once they tell that, you will hit this URL and you are testing, which is okay, fine. At the same time dev B have also deployed his code into QA environment, and when he deployed his code will override the changes what dev A have deployed in the QA server, right? So right now proto-commerce code is present in this QA environment, which is done by dev A, and this proto-commerce A have changes for left navigation links. Now when the dev B also deployed his code, again there will be no multiple instances of code, there will be only one code which will be accessed through URL. Now proto-commerce B code is deployed top over this, so that means this has overridden. Now when QA started testing, he will not see these links, and he may think that, oh, there is something wrong, there is a bug, I could not see the links on the left page. Okay, because the code is no more present. Another guy have deployed his code into the environment which got replaced, and he can see checkout button, and he might be wondered, have you developed this or this? Okay, then you will realize that another team is also using the same QA environment and they have given their code onto this which got replaced. So what is the solution here? You either need to wait until testing is completely done for this, and then you might ask your dev A to push again and deploy the code. Okay, so in this case either you have to wait, or you need to, or your team has to be provided with multiple QA environments. One QA environment is not enough. So this is QA.com, which actually points to QA server, right? You can have one more environment, that means one more server, one more database where you can deploy, and the URL of that can be QA1, and you can have another environment. So in the big projects, at least $1 million project or banking projects, you will at least have 5 QA environments, because multiple projects will be going on and one environment is not enough to test your project, right? So multiple teams will be working on multiple features. So QA2, QA3, QA4, these are nothing but URL where you can hit and get access to that server. So you can tell that pain point is having environments, that you have only 2 or 1 environment in your project, but there are multiple teams working on it and everyone trying to push their code onto the same environment, which is causing us to break and which is delaying us to give sign off on testing part, because you need to wait until someone completes their testing on QA environment so that you can deploy your code into there. Okay, so that's really causing us a delay and you are not able to reach your commitments on time. This is the painful point what you have faced in your current project. This could be the best answer, and this answer will clearly tell that you have perfect real-time experience on this environment and testing industry. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this lecture. So that's about test environment setup. Make sure there is one environment ready to test before development guy gives you a story. Okay, and make sure data is also set up for that environment. Alright, in the next lecture, let's talk about requirement traceability matrix. We skipped that part when we are talking about test case development. Let's do that in the next lecture. Thank you.